loses to Miami. Another loss for Pitt, moving to 500 after a 3-0 start. Another loss here, of course, in conference play. Alan Saunders, our Pitt guy, now has joined us. So, Alan, first off, thanks for joining me here with, replacing Mike, who's been with me most of the season and obviously having to cover the game in addition to this now. So you're really pulling full-time duty here on the Pitt beat. But the Panthers fall. They end up making it a little bit of a game towards the end. What are your initial thoughts? And I also do definitely want to get your thoughts on Kenny Pickett not playing in this game, Pitt being out without some of those stars in this game, being undermanned, because that appeared to be different than what Pat Narduzzi was hinting at just a couple days ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the final score, Pitt loses by just about what they were expected to lose by. I think they were somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 14-point underdogs in this one. They lose 31-19. And they do it with a backup quarterback and Joey Yellen, who played most but not all of the game. Davis Bevel also played a couple series in the first half, as it didn't quite seem like Pitt was sure what they were going to do at quarterback without Kenny Pickett, although Pat Narduzzi said after the game they had known early in the week that Pickett would not be able to play, even though he said on Thursday that Pitt was, quote, pretty healthy.
I swear I heard that too.
Yeah. Quote, liked where Kenny is right now. I wonder was Kenny at the bar when he said that, and that's why he liked where Kenny is right now. Let's just be frank. You have to come out of this week thinking that Pat Narduzzi is full of shit every time he opens his mouth. I don't know how you can believe anything he says going forward about his players, their availability. He just blatantly lied about Kenny Pickett's status this week. It's one thing to say, look, I don't talk about injuries, I don't talk about player availability, but to say that, quote, we're pretty healthy in a game where his starting quarterback didn't play, his starting cornerback didn't play, his starting tight end didn't play, a starting defensive tackle didn't play, an important backups at running back, defensive tackle, and tight end. Oh, and the middle linebacker didn't play. He's missing like 10 guys from the two teams that didn't even travel with the team to Miami. And he said, quote, we're pretty healthy. Like that, no, you're not, Pat. If that's pretty healthy, like that, no. Just and so like to start the game there.
Yeah, right.
To start the game there from already 2 touchdown underdogs, already probably going to lose a game to Miami. I honestly feel like the end result turns out okay, right? I mean, I thought Joey Yellen looked fine, if not great. He was making his second career start. I didn't have high expectations for him against a very talented, fast Miami defense. He generally took care of the football against a group that can really turn you over and is notorious for that. Look, they went with a conservative offensive game plan. That makes a lot of sense. You're trying to protect a quarterback making his second start. Yeah, I mean, everything else that happened sort of tracks, except to me, sort of a crazy decision in the first half to call a fake punt on a 4th and 10 on your own side of the 50-yard line. That ends up going for points. And then the defense gives up 3 big plays on busted coverages, something that really, in my opinion, should not be happening with
we'll get there.
A very veteran defense. I think that's the frustrating part is that, look, Pat Narduzzi's defense can put his defenders in some bad situations sometimes. They give up that back safety help in exchange for more pressure, right? They're doing that on purpose. And if you get beat doing that, well, you just kind of chalk that up to that's what we do. But when you blow coverages, when you leave guys wide open and you have 7 or 8 seniors on that defense, to me, I think that's pretty inexcusable. They lose that way. And I think, it all adds up, right? The beginning of we went from feeling good to no Kenny Pickett and none of these other guys that are injured. And then you end with the defense giving up some very makeable plays. And, I think it eclipses the feeling of like, hey, they pretty much hung with the number 13 in the team in the country with the backup quarterback. I don't know. If you want to be very optimistic, I think you can find that middle spot, but it all adds up to me that Pitt is in a pretty bad place right now.
Yeah, and certainly after last week and what's happened the last couple weeks, I'm sure Pitt fans are having trouble being optimistic about this program, and certainly not nearly where they were when that 3-0 start occurred here. And Ryan, that's the beauty of digital media here. We can really let it loose, especially when the head coach, I mean, really, to put it bluntly, Alan, I'm glad you said it. It appears Pat Narduzzi just flat out lied. There's really no other thing to think. I don't know what could else have occurred unless there's some disciplinary infraction. It's really either that or a blatant lie. And no, there's no coverage to lean in that direction. What I do want to ask Alan here, because you touched on that a little bit in your analysis after, of course, touching on the weirdness of all of those players being out in somewhat of a surprise, and how this game went. It was kind of close, especially in terms of what you expect a top 15 team, the way Pitt's been playing and who they actually had with them. And Addison had a real big game, 8 for 147, 18.4 per. Didn't get in the end zone, but certainly had a bigger game than last week, so they're able to use him more with a backup quarterback. Not a bad day at all. And Joey Yellen, as you mentioned, 22 for 46. It's a lot of passes, not that many completed, but 277, a touchdown, was sacked 3 times, no picks. Again, second career start. You can't be too upset with that either. But who you can be upset at, and this is what Mike was really upset last couple of weeks. We've been pointing to this all season. We gave them praise when they deserved it earlier in the year, but there were spots where there was still some concern. Mike thought I was picking at him too much. It really now got exploited the last few weeks. Is Pitt's defense a veteran defense? There was spots early in the year. DeMar Hamlin seemed to be sleeping on some plays, but now you get into it. Really, it's coming to roost. They aren't performing. They are losing. This is a good Miami team. The last couple of weeks, BC and NC State, not quality teams. They didn't show up in. What are your thoughts in terms of this defense's level of play overall this year? Why it has seemingly been struggling more than anyone would have thought with this veteran bunch and all the recruits finally in there, and where you, I guess, go from here the rest of the year, because this defense was said nationally to be one of the best in the country entering the season, and they have just flat out not played like it, and they deserve criticism because they should be better.
Well, I think the end result is about what I expected. If you'd have said Pitt's going to go down to Miami,
sure,
and they're going to give up 31 points, yeah, that's fine. That's
okay.
I mean, that's a good Miami team. That's not a great defensive performance, but that's only like slightly below average, and that's a good Miami team. Now Miami's playing without Brevin Jordan. They're sort of all ACC type tight end, so that changes things a little bit. But to me, it's about how they completely dominated this game, except for 3 or 4 plays. You could see when Pitt was playing well on defense, when Pitt bothered to cover the intended receiver of the pass,
right?
They were an outstanding defense.
But hasn't that been Pitt's defense most of the year?
No, I mean, no, they have not had to this extent that kind of blown coverages.
Okay.
I mean, they had some that I felt like Boston College did a really good job of exploiting some weaknesses in Pitt's scheme, where they kind of put some pressure on decisions and did some things like that. This was just flat out blown coverage, right? There's nobody when the ball's caught, nobody's in the picture 3 times, and there are 3 big plays, and they're all touchdowns, and it's more than half of Miami's passing yards. I think 118 of 222 passing yards on those 3 plays. Outside of those 3 plays, Miami did nothing offensively the entire day. And like I said, when those balls are caught, there isn't even a Pitt player in the picture. You can't play the if-but game on defense, though, right? You can't say, like, Pitt had an outstanding day on defense except for 3 plays. It doesn't work. You can lose the game on 3 plays, and today that's exactly what Pitt's defense did.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is disappointing because not only is it a really talented bunch that everybody would agree with, but it's also a veteran defense, as you mentioned. The veteran defense, it's one thing if you get beat, but to be really asleep at the wheel on a few different plays, which those plays can swing a game, certainly against a top 15 team. Alan, unless you have anything else here on this Pitt game, one thing I do want to ask you here, and we'd be remiss if we did not talk about it based on talk about stories throughout college football today. And there's not been any crazy upset. I mentioned with Ryan the Tennessee loss, but I don't think anyone's shocked by Tennessee losing even to a bad rival in Kentucky. That's just what Tennessee does. But Clemson puts a whole new meaning to boat racing a team. 73-7. A trouncing of Georgia Tech. Obviously, Clemson's the top team right now. They're ranked number 1 in the country. Wouldn't be any shock if they win it all again. They're certainly up there with anybody else. Obviously, they're the leader in the ACC. But there has been conversation of maybe Miami, maybe some others getting closer and that gap narrowing. Do you feel that gap's really narrowed this year, or based on what we've now seen this year? I mean, it's not like Georgia Tech is a true contender, but still they're dominating teams out there. Is maybe that a little premature, and that gap is still so wide with Clemson and everybody else?
I came into this year not thinking that Clemson was like unbeatably good, was going to be like unbeatably good. I thought they lost a lot on defense. I thought there was an opportunity for them to be upset in conference play this year.
Okay.
And then you bring in Notre Dame, which is another quality team, right? And gives them probably a tougher game than they've had in the ACC in 4 or 5 years. But I've not been particularly impressed with the contenders. I came into this game really interested to see how good Miami really is, right? They beat up on Louisville and Florida State. I think we're pretty sure that those two teams are pretty bad at this point. Florida State lost to Georgia Tech, and you saw what Georgia Tech just did.
Yeah, again, 73-7.
By the transitive property, they're terrible. And so that Miami team did not impress me as a team that is going to challenge Clemson at the top of this conference anytime soon. I thought North Carolina coming into this year had the horses offensively. When you look at Sam Howell and Brown and the number of playmakers they have, and I think an underrated defense, they felt like a team that could maybe be there for me. And they haven't really impressed me a lot either. I have not seen Notre Dame play yet, so I'll withhold judgment on the Irish. But to me, they're the only hope, I think, at this point. They're the only team that really looks like they're capable of challenging Clemson at this point.
Ryan, any thoughts there? I saw you nodding your head on Notre Dame being a true contender, and it seemed like North Carolina could have been that team as well. Many thought Miami, but I watched a lot of Miami oddly this year on random times. I've been watching college football, and they haven't been looking that great. Granted, they beat a Pitt team with a backup QB, but is Clemson everybody else, and is anyone besides Notre Dame a contender?
I think you guys have kind of covered it. I mean, Miami, I think for a while there was thought to be the team that was maybe going to give Clemson somewhat of a run, but obviously that didn't happen. We all saw what happened there. And then I think it really is. I think it's Notre Dame or bust for as far as the rest of the ACC goes, unless Clemson really just has a bad, sleepy Saturday down the road and just really kind of messes this whole thing up for themselves and kind of gets in their own way. I think it's really Notre Dame or bust as far as the ACC goes.
Yeah, and it's obviously different with Notre Dame and COVID and being more part of the ACC this year and officially in there. So that definitely changes things for Clemson. I would absolutely agree that would be the toughest thing Clemson's had regular season-wise in conference in some time, but they've proven themselves when they certainly get to the bowl games or the playoff. As we kind of round things out here, the combo college football post-game show of the day with both Pitt and West Virginia kicking off at the same time. We've been combining things here for Pittsburgh Sports Now and, of course, WV Sports Now as well. Head over to those two websites. Tons of post-game coverage already there. Alan threw a lot up there on PSN before joining me. And, of course, Cody Nesper throwing a lot up at WV Sports Now. I'm Mike Asti, Alan Saunders with us here throughout our network, one of our main beat guys and certainly covering Pitt, and Ryan Decker of WBOY, gracious enough to join me here to fill in for Tom, who's covering some high school games, some big high school games in West Virginia, also throwing that coverage over there at WV Sports Now. I just want to, I guess, kind of close with Ryan. Who would you say is the top Big 12 team? Is there a chance for the Big 12 team to be a part of this playoff? Because that seems to now really, really be in question with Texas losing the rivalry game, Oklahoma losing all over the place and not even being ranked right now. Oklahoma could maybe be that sexy pick, but they haven't been great despite getting some wins. There's really nobody else. And as we talked about earlier, with the emergence of the Big Ten in the Pac-12 and clearly Clemson taking a spot, not much room left out there. And that if Ohio State opens up, dominates. Penn State opens up, dominates. Michigan, they're going to want involved. Wisconsin, too. One of those four teams is getting in there, maybe multiple. And we don't know how they're going to involve the rankings with teams playing so different amount of games. But where does the Big 12 fall?
Unless Oklahoma State really starts to look impressive over the next couple weeks, the remaining 6 weeks of the Big 12 season, I think the Big 12 gets left out again because you got to think Alabama or Georgia, as long as neither one of those two schools kills the other one today, they're both going to be in the mix the entire season. So there's possibly two spots.
And they can deal with a loss.
Yep, Clemson. There's another team that, again, unless they get in their own way, they'll be in the mix the entire way. That's likely another playoff spot gone. And then you mentioned the 3 or 4 really good, really talented teams out of the Big Ten of Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. You can throw another one, maybe a Michigan in there if you want to get crazy or something. But
even Notre Dame, if they go through the whole thing and just lose to Clemson, they're going to have an argument.
Right.
Real
for
big
sure.
one.
So I think really the Big 12, once again, it's going to be left on the outside looking in unless Oklahoma State and Chuba Hubbard really start to get things going and really look good over the next 6 weeks. Maybe you've got a shot there, but they would have to beat then a really good, whether it's an improved Oklahoma team who kind of goes on its own run over the last 6 weeks, or if Kansas State stays on its roll, they would have to beat a highly ranked Kansas State team in the Big 12 title game to even have a shot to get into that playoff. And even then, I don't think they stack up well with what everyone else around the country is going to bring into the picture.
And it's going to be crowded. It's going to be interesting. There's obviously going to be controversy and banter as there is every year, maybe more so this year than ever before, because you're going to have teams finishing the years way later than others and teams figuring out rankings when they open up things with the college football rankings, playing way less games than others. But yeah, I would say Notre Dame would have a real legit argument if they go through everything with just a loss to Clemson, and to leave them out just because you got to throw some other teams in there, that might be the team that ends up with a lot of complaining and maybe a legitimate case,
right?
If the season ends with them left out, and that's how the schedule goes here. I appreciate it to both of you guys here, certainly on the fill-in work here for Mike and Tom, who normally join me for this. Alan, especially, I appreciate it here with covering the Pitt game, while also joining us for this post-game show, and especially trying to trek through news that I'm not sure whether you can believe here moving forward, or what you're trying to almost be a mind reader here and a wizard as you're covering the Pitt beat here for us. I don't know. Any final thoughts before they close the show, just in terms of that? Did you do the Narduzzi Zoom? Did he say anything in terms of that question?
Yeah, I mean, he said that he knew that it wasn't going to be able to play on Monday, and that he didn't want Miami to know that. Which, okay. I mean, I really wish I could have then gone to Manny Diaz and said, "Gee, Manny, how are you still able to hold Pitt to 19 points, not having any idea who was going to play a quarterback this week? That was such an incredible performance by your defense. I can't believe that, not having any idea that Joey Yellen was going to play, that you'd be able to hold Pitt to 19. That's, man, it's absurd. I mean, it's truly absurd. Yeah. And again, if you really don't, if you're just dedicated to that cause, then just don't say anything. Say, I'm not going to talk about it. You'll find out who's going to play quarterback when somebody comes out of the tunnel on Saturday. Right. I think that's stupid, but fine. But I just, and you know what? I think the other thing is, read the room, right? I mean, he's already clearly losing and or lost the confidence of the fan base. I don't think lying to them helps. I'll be perfectly blunt. I think when there are a lot of people out here saying that Pat Narduzzi should not have his job right now. Right. And I don't think telling them one thing and then doing something else is a good strategy most of the time. And I think certainly right now it isn't.
Yeah, and they started 3-0 for the first time under Narduzzi. Could have been 4 or 5-0 with the way that schedule looked. The wheels have totally fell off to the point that they crashed and are in flames right now. You're not going to get mad about a loss to Miami with a backup QB, but when you lose to NC State and BC before it, looks really, really bad to be 500 right now. There's really no hope, I'd imagine, for the rest of this season for those Pitt fans. And you talk about reading the room. Most on that Pitt beat have been on that Pitt beat for a while. Certainly Allen has. They know when someone's flat lying to them, and Narduzzi, it really appeared flat lied. And you could do the Belichick thing where you just throw everybody as questionable and you don't say anything. That would at least be respectable. But instead, he basically just told a complete flat lie. But regardless, Pitt ends up losing and played a little decent there. Certainly Joey Yellen, I think we're going to give a round of applause for his effort here for sure, regardless of when he was aware. For a second career start against a top 15 team, he certainly did okay. But Pitt now 500, and who knows the rest of the year. Maybe they're going to upset somebody, but that's probably not something Pitt fans care that much about moving forward. The Mountaineers get a victory. They were supposed to take care of business. They do. They struggle early. They eventually do it late. They eventually cover that spread, but the bettors were probably concerned early. The Mountaineers now 3-1 on the year, and they continues to trek towards tougher games here, certainly moving onward with the schedule, and close to, I'd imagine, a ranking for the Mountaineers. So we will see. I don't know if this game did it, and they got more teams coming into play soon, but keep on keeping on, and that should eventually happen for the Mountaineers. So thanks again to Alan Saunders, of course, with us here in the Now Network of Pittsburgh Sports Now, and of course, Ryan Decker of WBOY. For all of us here at the Pittsburgh Sports Now family of networks, Pittsburgh Sports Now and WV Sports Now in particular, for this broadcast, for Ryan, for Alan, I'm Mike Asti, and for all of us at Pittsburgh Sports Live, that's it for this college football postgame of this college football Saturday. A beautiful day in the air, so win or lose, we have college football. It's out there, it's happening. And again, that was something in question even months ago. And the college football is not having to deal with the mess the NFL is having to deal with as much, even though some coaches are. Certainly Les Miles didn't coach today for Kansas. But either way, enjoy yourselves, because it's positive that this is all even occurring, if nothing else out there. All right. Thanks, guys.